word to wise. Grass only greener when it's fertilized. Gave them truth in these songs, they prefer to lies. Destiny beautiful, adrift in her purple lies. You can't see me, you Stevie. Wondering how I reach more evolutions than Evie and make it look easy.
What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Earning Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. Okay, so I don't normally do top 10 videos like this. This is not my thing. It's not my thing, it's other people's thing. And while I don't think that videos like this are bad, historically speaking, they've never done well on my channel, so I just don't do them very often, if ever. But I will say, recently I saw a video by another YouTube channel, Top 10 Nerd, which is a very popular channel and a very good channel. They put out a video not too long ago, within the last couple of weeks, that kind of irked me. No offense against them or anything like that, because even heroes mess up. But they did a video titled, and I want to make sure I got this right, Top 10 Most Powerful Milestone Comics Superheroes. That said, yes, the list that they put together was a very nice list, but it was not the most powerful characters in Milestone Comics. Were they some of the more noteworthy characters, or I guess more iconic characters in terms of breaking down doorways and paving paths for future progression in comics? Yes, a good chunk of them were, but it seems like that was their definition of powerful, and that's not my definition of powerful. That's just my definition of being unique. However, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go through their list and I'm gonna give you my rebuttals for each of these characters that they have listed erroneously as being the most powerful. First off, let's start with number 10. They listed Masquerade of the Blood Syndicate. Now, don't get me wrong, Masquerade is a really cool character, very awesome character, and by my own estimation, I would say probably the first legitimate example of a well done trans character in mainstream comics. And not just the one, but we've actually had from Milestone 2 different characters who could fit that bill, and Masquerade was one of them. And it was one of those situations where nobody really overreacted to it. It was just like, oh yeah, they're trans, whatever, it's a thing, nobody cares. It was kind of how it was treated. It wasn't that big of a deal, though Masquerade was problematic in their own right with how they treated other LGBTQIA+ characters, threatening to out one of their fellow Blood Syndicate members because they found out about Masquerade's secret, and not even threatening to use it against them. Just like they were so guarded of it. They're like, no, I'm gonna out you as being gay. And it's like, come on now. That said, Masquerade would not even make my top 50 Milestone most powerful characters list. I'm actually gonna give this one to an obviously more powerful character by the name of Gloria Mundi. Not to be confused with the 2019 movie, but this is a character who is straight up just an alien. We don't even really know a whole lot about this character. This character came along roughly around the time that Milestone and the Dakotaverse had shifted over to DC Comics. They really didn't have a lot of time to go into and delve into this character, but what little bit we do know about this character is Gloria Mundi was actually able to steal the souls of others, absorb them, whether it was willingly or unwillingly. Not only that, but she is considered to be a living receptacle of the hopes and dreams of 1,000 dead races, all culminated together into one entity. I would count that as being more powerful than Masquerade. Next up, they listed the character Donner, which Donner, very powerful character, one of the strongest women in the Milestone Comics universe. I would even go as far as say one of the strongest people, period, if characters like Icon, so on and so forth, didn't exist in the Dakotaverse. Yeah, she would probably be the most powerful as far as strength goes. But we also got to be honest with ourselves. Donner, also a character that wasn't very well explored, and I can think of a character who got about the same level of exposure, but also had the benefit of having their own comic for a brief amount of time in Milestone, and that is the character Y-Sun. Now, Y-Sun did actually make it onto Top 10 Nerds list, so I can't flame him too bad for that. However, I would put Y-Sun in this place because it kind of felt like Donner was only there because she's a lesbian. That's kind of why that felt like they were there. I was like, that's cool. But Milestone didn't have just one or two LGBTQIA+ characters. They had multiples. It wasn't something that they shied away from. So while yes, it was noteworthy at the time because yeah, it was the 90s, no one was really doing that. It's one of those things where, okay, you put that character there specifically for that reason. At least that's what it comes off as. In the case of Y-Sun though, Y-Sun is a character who is effectively invulnerable vulnerable to any and all things. He is also one of the first, I would dare say, depictions of a Muslim superhero. But yeah, Wise Sun was effectively invulnerable. You really couldn't hurt him, and even if you could, you had to go through great efforts to do so. However, the thing that was noteworthy about Wise Sun is that not only was he invulnerable, but in his miniseries, he was able to actually take that same invulnerability and transfer it over to his pregnant significant other, protecting her while she was carrying their child to term. Now, another thing that's noteworthy about Wise Sun is the fact that he can also make other people vulnerable. Like if you have superpowers, if he touches you, you're vulnerable. You don't have the same level of protections that you had before. The one caveat to this is that it seems to also make him vulnerable as well. Now, next up, they put the character Blitzen right after Donner because, you know, Donner, Blitzen. Not only that, those two characters were in a lesbian relationship, and while Blitzen is superhumanly fast, and yes, she did create the formula that granted her superhuman speed, she is not even the most powerful speedster in all of comics, let alone DC Comics. And not only that, it's just the fact that, yeah, I felt like Blitzen was only put on the list because she's dating Donner, and it's just like, all right, well, we're doing that, huh? I'm actually gonna put a character by the name of Iota in place of Blitzen, and the reason why is because Iota, thanks to an accident when she was experimenting with some unidentified energy signatures, she is able to shrink things down to a microscopic level, not just herself, but even other items and other people. Not only that, she also discovered, when she got these powers, a subatomic universe in the Dakotaverse, something that they called the Inniverse, which is very similar to the microverse of Marvel Comics. It's also a realm that has its own laws of physics, and is just a strange and unusual world where you can see a lot of small stuff. Overall, her power set is so interesting because of the fact that she has been able to shrink things down that are gargantuan in size compared to her. She's been able to shrink down battleships, warships, planes, jets, boats, everything, and she tends to keep them in her back pocket just in case she ever needs them. She even keeps an array of shrunken weapons, microscopic versions of heavy machine guns and chains and battle axes and swords and Uzi 9mm and everything. And not only that, but she's also one of those characters who is the inventor of the team. She has created a lot of interesting gadgets for the Shadow Cabinet as well as herself. Also, I think it's something that was never really fully explored. The idea that, yeah, she can turn other people to a shrunken size. A lot of people tend to underestimate the idea because we tend to think of this in terms of Ant-Man or other more moral standing superheroes, but the Shadow Cabinet was not a moral team. They would do anything by any means necessary. That includes Iota. It would not be out of the realm of possibility for her to shrink one of their enemies and just simply step on him and go on about her business. Next up on their list was Wise Sun. We've already covered Wise Sun, and, you know, we don't have to do anything there. That was a good pick by them. I give credit where credit is due. However, I'm gonna pull a play out of Top 10 Nerds Playbook, and I'm gonna put two characters together simply because they're connected. And first off, I want to put up the character of Fade. Fade is a member of the Blood Syndicate, and his whole beef was phase shifting. He could walk and fly and move through solid matter. He was basically Vision of the Avengers. He could even enter your body and then become solid, effectively destroying you. But that wasn't all he could do. Albeit this was one of those things he wasn't really good at controlling, and it was something that was kind of a detriment to his character, is that his body was always in phase shift between different points in space and time. Fade could literally spread his body across 3 seconds of actual time, effectively making him a time traveler. He could even see ahead in this time and backwards in this time, and it was something that allowed him to go against more powerful foes than himself and allow him to get the drop on him. He could literally see what you were about to do 3 seconds from now, act on it, you wouldn't see it, and then 3 seconds later you would feel the effects of what Fade just did. Fade was an incredibly powerful character. Not only that, he was also an LGBTQIA+ character. I don't want anybody to think I'm downing on LGBTQIA+ characters because of what I said about Donner or Blitzen. No, I am all for it. I think anyone who watches the channel knows that I'm all about it. But at the same time, I feel like characters were just picked because they were LGBTQIA+, not actually getting the ones who were actually the more powerful characters, or at the very least, the more interesting characters. That said, we can't talk about Fade without talking about Flashback. Now, for their number 5 pick, they put the character Rocket. And Rocket, I love the character. I think she's awesome. I think she's a great character. She is a freaking fantastic creation of Dwayne McDuffie and is is, I would say, arguably the more interesting part of Icon's comics. However, she is not in any way, shape, form, or fashion one of the most powerful people in the Milestone comics. Dakotaverse, it just is no. So for my number 5 pick, I'm going to use Fade's sister, Flashback. Now, Flashback has a power kind of similar to Fade's. Now, while she can fly, she cannot phase shift the way he does, but she can do something similar, and that is she can travel backwards in time up to 3 seconds. Now, 3 seconds, and I probably should have said this in regards to talking about Fade, but 3 seconds probably doesn't seem like a whole lot of time, but honestly, in the realm of superhero comics, 3 seconds can be an eternity. And it kind of was for Flashback, because in the pages of Blood Syndicate, the entire Blood Syndicate got wiped out. They were completely destroyed. Everyone was killed except for Flashback. And Flashback had just enough time to go back in time 3 seconds and warn everybody about what was going to happen and save their lives. Now, here's the one rub with her powers in that regard, is that she does remember the lost timeline. Whatever was the original timeline of whatever it is that she went back and changed, she will remember what actually happened. And this did lead her to drug addiction, specifically crack addiction, which was something she did eventually get past, but it was something that weighed on her soul so heavily because she literally witnessed everyone she cared about die right before her eyes. And had she not had those abilities, the Blood Syndicate would have been done before they even got started. The next one they put on their list was Hardware, and man, this is a tough one for me because I love that character, but Hardware is, once again, far and away from being one of the most powerful characters in Milestone's Dakotaverse. I would put him in my top 20, but he would not make my top 10. He is a powerful character in terms of his technology and what it can do. Heck, the guy was doing things that Iron Man wasn't doing until 10 to 15 years later, and yeah, it just is what it is. Despite that, though, the character I'm going to put in their place is going to be the character Zombie. Zombie is a little known character because he was one of the few characters outside of Icon and Static and Hardware to get their own solo series, and he's also the first Korean superhero to have his own comic. But that said, he didn't have the same kind of noteworthy drawing power that other characters tended to have. However, Zombie was no less powerful for it. Zombie has nanomachines in his body that effectively make him immortal and indestructible. Things that were introduced into his body when he was killed by the Sugar Man. These nanomachines, they will eat just about anything, destroy just about anything, and give it to Zombie. That's kind of why he has the name. He's not actually a zombie in the traditional sense, but just it was a name that sounded cool, I guess. And for a character who has a power set that's, I don't know, closer to Wolverine's, he was more like a John Constantine style character. He kind of moved and operated in the realm of the supernatural. I did a video about this character, and I've done videos about most of these characters in some way, shape, form, or fashion, so if you want to know more, I mean, you can go check those videos out. Zombie was one of those types of characters, yeah, you can't kill him. He won't die. It just ain't gonna happen. You could literally rip his head off and he would still come back. His healing factor is even faster than both Wolverine's and Deadpool's, and some would even make the argument that his healing factor is faster than Bloodshot's, who is known to be one of the fastest healing factors in all of comics. Now, granted, Zombie is on Top 10 Nerds list. Zombie was actually their number 4. And speaking of number 4, let's go ahead and move on to that one. Now, since we already discussed Zombie, I'm going to talk about a character from the Shadow Cabinet called Starlight. Starlight is a character basically threw herself in the way of some strange energy ray that was going to attack this doctor at her university, and when it happened, this ray turned her into a living pulsar. Now, that being said, she was giving off all kinds of crazy radiation, and Hardware was the one who actually saved her life and helped her control her powers, keeping her from radiating any person who was near her. However, over time, she did learn to control these powers, and if you're familiar with the character Monica Rambeau from Marvel Comics, aka Spectrum, one of the former Captain Marvels, you probably would understand what I mean when I say this character is basically the Milestone Comics equivalent of Monica Rambeau. She can turn into and control any facet of the electromagnetic spectrum that exists, whether it's electromagnetism, gamma rays, X-rays, microwaves, does not matter. She can turn into those things, and she can control them and project them. Not only that, she can fly at over 25,000 miles per hour speed, and she can teleport herself using her abilities to pretty much anywhere she wants. Like, the only real limit to Starlight Starlight's abilities is the fact that she is subject to the laws of physics. And if she goes somewhere where the laws of physics are out of whack from what we are normally used to here on Earth, that's really the only time that her powers become, kind of wackadoo. But anyways, if you weren't reading Shadow Cabinet, you'd have no clue who she was. Now, the next 3 characters that they had on their list, I am actually going to agree with 100%. My only difference is going to be is where I place them. The character that they had on their list as the number 3rd was Static, which, to be fair, that is not a bad place for Static to be. However, I'm going to take a character that they had at their number 1, and I'm going to place him back at number 3, and that's Icon. Icon is a character who is, for all intents and purposes, he is an alien from a faraway galaxy, and his ship crash landed on Earth, and to help him blend in with the society of whatever planet he wound up crashing on, his ship copied the DNA of the first person that encountered the ship and would make his DNA match that DNA, turning him from an alien into a human. And it just so happened that a black slave was the one who found his ship, ergo he becomes a black man, and he is very long lived. He has lived since the time of slavery and doesn't look like he's a day over his mid-30s. For all intents and purposes, he's Superman. He actually can do just about anything that Superman can do. He has a lot of the same abilities and powers, and even lacks some of Superman's limitations. They've even gone to battle in the past where Superman has stated that no one has ever hit him as hard as Icon has, though that is a statement that Superman will say later on various other times through in the future leading forward. But he's basically Superman if Superman had a far greater genius intellect and was a little more Republican right-leaning. I put Icon at number 3 because I'm going to put Static at number 2. And the reason I'm doing that is because Static over time has proven, especially the time since Milestone Forever, when at that point in time, effectively, Icon was no longer around. Static would end up leveling up to becoming pretty much the premier superhero of the Dakotaverse. His power set allows him to control all facets of the electromagnetic spectrum. He can use these abilities in ways that have not even really been fully tested and tried out. His powers allow him to effectively be not just Black Lightning, but Magneto as well. He has used these abilities to levitate things, to shock and incapacitate his targets and foes. He uses this ability to help him fly, and he's even been able to regenerate body parts using his electromagnetic powers. Beyond all that, even when his superhuman abilities don't win the day, he is so intelligent that he has actually found ways to defeat his foes without even having to throw a single punch. That is something that Icon cannot say. And for all intents and purposes, yeah, Static is the Spider-Man of Milestone and by proxy DC Comics. It's something I've always said, and I believe it is even something that Top 10 Nerd said as well, so I do agree with that. And more importantly, I feel like just in terms of abilities and raw power, Static, if he really wanted to unleash, and that's something I think a lot of people don't talk about, is how he holds back his power. He doesn't use the full brunt of his abilities at all times. In fact, when he's going against other people, he holds back a great deal, and if he didn't, my God, he would wipe the floor with Icon. Now, last and most certainly not least is my character at number 1. Now, granted, they put this character at number 2. I'm gonna put this character at number 1 because this character is Dharma. Dharma is the leader and creator of the Shadow Cabinet. Not only that, he has the ability to touch an object, to view an object and see into its future and its past. He has been responsible for the thwarting of multiple apocalyptic events on Earth, and he created the Shadow Cabinet to thwart its most recent oncoming apocalypse. Now, though he did lose his ever-loving mind and become a villain for a little bit, that has since kind of been swept under the rug, and more importantly, that wasn't the thing that made him the most powerful. Yeah, he can see into the future, whatever, big deal, but that wasn't the only thing he could do. Dharma is responsible for the merging of the DC Comics and Milestone Dakotaverse realities. He brought those realities, warped them, and made them into one cohesive Earth. His power to warp reality is on a scale that nobody else on this list, nor anyone else in the Milestone Media Dakotaverse could ever touch. Not only that, if it were not for Dharma, there would not have been a Big Bang that would have created most of the characters that are on this list, Static included. All of this done because he wanted to create an army of powerful people who could basically stop the oncoming apocalypse. The very thing that he saved the Dakotaverse from when he merged it with the DC Comics universe. Also, might I add, on top of reality warping, after he absorbed his sisters, Plus and Nardi, who are also members of the Shadow Cabinet, he became capable of controlling living energy. So he became even more powerful after the fact. Anyways, this video is not meant to be dismissive of what Top 10 Nerd did. It was one of those situations where I always say when you see something out there, you're like, oh my God, that person did something that I don't agree with. You know, here, let me educate. Let me put something out there to counterbalance that. And it's really just more a thing where I wanted to address this because when I watched the video, I got really excited to see the top 10 nerd video about the most powerful characters in Milestone media. And when I saw the video, I was getting excited. They had me ready to go. And then when they revealed that Masquerade was number 10, my heart immediately sank, and it kept sinking so long as I kept watching the video. And not to diss on anybody, but I kind of felt this is something that was put together by someone who didn't really read Milestone comics. Not to say they didn't read any, but I felt like they just read the ones that everyone felt were the more popular ones. I totally get it. I completely understand it. That said, though, this was my version of their list, the top 10 most powerful Milestone Comics superheroes. That said, if you enjoyed this video, make sure you Hulk smash that like button, share this video with your friends, and more importantly, let me know if you agree or disagree with my list. Let me know what your top 10 most powerful Milestone media characters are. Keep it plus ultra and sound off in the comments.